All right, all of you out there, all of you that try to be all reserved and composed and everything, if you're not doing a poker right now, shame on you. Because I am. You know me by now. All right, let's put Steve's 130-6 to work here. I'm going to start with a pretty easy task. I'm going to start with just 2 layers of genuine cowhide, and I'm going to do a zigzag. Here we go. Oh, and I should mention, I'm operating this machine with my hand because it's wired to go on a table. So, here we go. Not too bad for by hand. Beautiful zigzag, look at that. Lock stitch and top stitch. No surprise, right? It's been on this workbench. Duh. All right, let's come back down this leather and do a straight stitch. Seems like a waste to just put 1 row of stitches on this beautiful genuine cowhide. All right, here we go. Oops, I better bring my take-up arm up. Here we go. Oops. Get your hand all the way on the foot control there, buddy. Yes, I did say get my hand on the foot control all the way because I told you that's the way I'm sewing right now. So there's our lock stitch. Beautiful lock stitch in every way. Both the zigzag we did first and then the straight stitch. We flip it over. Beautiful top stitches as well, whether it's that zigzag on the bottom or the straight stitch we did on top. Just absolutely spectacular stitches. And you might have noticed I said, because as you saw this premiere open, you saw it says right on the front of here, made in Germany, Pfaff or Pfaff 130. So you might be saying, well, why are you calling it a 130-6? Because it is. It is a 130-6. And it is a 130-6 because of something I'll show you in a little bit. But right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay down another straight stitch and I'm going to shorten that stitch length considerably. Alright, so make sure my take-up arm is all the way up and we'll see what we get this time. Here we go. Oh, that's a tiny stitch. That is a teeny tiny stitch. That's the technical term, by the way, is teeny tiny. No, that is that's incredibly small. I would say I probably have it at about oh gosh, 12 to 14 stitches per inch. I don't have it as small as it can go. It'll go smaller than this. Oh, and I apologize. And there's the lock stitch as well. Perfect in every way, as you would expect. And I should mention that Steve and his wife live out on the East Coast, and they shipped this Pfaff or Pfaff 130-6 all the way from the Carolinas to me in Wisconsin. Those are gorgeous, aren't they? I'll just show them to you one last time, then toss them to the rear. So that again was 2 layers of genuine cowhide. We're probably talking about 8 ounces of genuine cowhide. So they shipped it to me, and this was Steve's grandmother's machine. This was her go-to machine. And I guess it kind of changed hands after his grandmother passed away. I believe it went to an aunt of his, and the aunt sewed on it for a while, and then it just sat there, idle, kind of sitting in a storage room or in a closet or whatever. and it wasn't used at all. And then all of a sudden, Steve and his wife, let me kind of talk while I'm folding here, starting with 2 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas. I'm going to fold it in half. We're up to 4 layers. I'm going to fold it one more time. We're all the way up to 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas. And I'm going to see if I can fit this underneath the presser foot. The 130-6 has good clearance. I wouldn't say it has the most outstanding clearance underneath the presser foot. So this may be a little bit more of a challenge than I would like to admit. But I'm going to keep the stitch a little bit on the shorter side, and I'm also going to go with a zigzag to start. So at any rate, yeah, it sat idle for a number of years. Finally, Steve and his wife kind of took an interest in it. They realized it had some needs. It had quite a few needs, as a matter of fact, mechanically, and also calibrating the number of the control centers, timing it, like I said, some paint work. And so they sent it to me. And I got it under the workbench, 2-3 days ago, and really kind of pumped some time into it. And she is a very happy girl now, a very happy girl. Or a German guy, maybe it's a German guy, I have no idea. So 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas. Let's see how this German machine does operating it with my hand, and we'll see if we can zip down this. Here we go. Intentionally was kind of pulling back the power a little bit there on the end, just because I wanted to show you, you don't have to blast it all the time. It's got a nice meaty motor on the back of it, and it can get the job done even if you throttle back that power just a little bit. So we laid down a much smaller zigzag this time, and it's a good looking zigzag. I'm going to turn it like this to start. That should be our top stitch, unless I flipped it too many times. That's our lock stitch there. And both of those stitches are absolutely spectacular. Look at the phone book that we just sewed through. I mean, 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas. It's crazy, isn't it? I mean, even if I pinch it together, that's a task that, I've said it before, if you look at some of the contemporary machines, even the long arm quilting machines, they would absolutely shriek in horror if you said, hey, let's do 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas, and they would be like, oh, I don't think so. That's not going to happen. That is not gonna happen. No way. All right, I'm gonna switch this back to a straight stitch. I'll lengthen that stitch out a fair amount, almost to max, and we'll lay down a straight stitch parallel with this zigzag that we just did. All right, you ready? I think I am. All right, let me just get our take-up arm to the highest position, and we'll see if we can launch into this next sew-off operated by Scott's hand on the foot controller. I should call it a hand controller for this premiere. Matter of fact, I am. From this point forward, and correct me in the chat if I mess up, I'm going to engage the hand controller to lay down these next stitches. Here we go. Yeah, I like that. That could be catchy. We might be onto something here with a hand controller. You never know. All right, so I'm going to tuck this behind so we're ready for our next sew off. And here's where we just did our next line of stitching right here. That straight stitch. Again, that's not at max. That's going to be probably about 70 to 75% of the way to the longest stitch that this Pfaff 130-6 will lay down. And this has a stitch range of, I would say, about 5 stitches per inch all the way down to 30 stitches per inch. So it's going to be real comparable to a Singer, maybe just be able to get a little bit larger on that stitch size than the average Singer machine can do. Now some of the much newer Singers that are computerized, they can lay down some pretty impressive stitches from a stitch size standpoint as well. And I'll lay this next row down next to this one just to show you comparatively when we go absolutely as large as we can. it's pretty noticeable. You can see right away that we've hit that peak threshold as far as laying down the largest stitches that we can, which again is probably about 5 stitches per inch. All right, here we go. Whoops, I hit the hand controller in the wrong way. My apologies. I had to give it a little bit more gas that time. You know what I mean? I just had to. All right, so you can see right away, let me give these a clip. You can see right away the difference in the stitch length. This is the row that we did first on the bottom here, and this is the row we just laid down. And you can see they're almost twice the size of the other one. So we're real close to that 5 stitches per inch mark on this middle row. And it's a beautiful stitch as well. We flip it over. The lock stitch and everything is equally gorgeous. Again, when you're lengthening that stitch out as far as this, you might have to increase your upper tension just slightly to define that lock stitch even more. It's not a bad lock stitch at all, but my standards are really, really, really high, and I would probably, if I were looking for near perfection, I would go ahead and lay that down with a little bit of an increase on that upper tension. And on this final row I'm going to do on this U.S. Army grade canvas, I'm going to shorten that stitch considerably, also do a straight stitch, and we'll see how that turns out through 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas. Let me get this all situated. Let me get my hand controller prepared. Ha ha ha! And we'll see how we do. All right, you ready? Here we go. We're going to be probably 20 to 25 stitches per inch. We're going to be way down there in that range. And I just wanted to show you, you can sew at a level like this, which is extreme, 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas. We're talking canvas, folks. We're talking Army grade canvas. And we've just laid down a variety of different stitches with different stitch lengths. This top one we just did here, this is our lock stitch. And you can see that is about as teeny tiny as we can get. We're almost at the max, close to 30 stitches per inch. Here we've got our mid-range one that's probably 5 stitches, 5 or 6 stitches per inch. And then we got this other one down here on the bottom that's going to be just a little bit, kind of in the middle of those 2 ranges. And then finally our zigzag. But all of those stitches are absolutely spectacular. And we've done it, again, just to remind you, we've done it through 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas. And when you can lay down with a machine this level of stitch quality, the spacing, the formation, everything from about 20 to 25 stitches per inch to kind of a mid-range, probably, I would say probably 10 to 12 stitches per inch, somewhere in that range. And then we go all the way down to 5 stitches per inch and a zigzag as well. This machine is operating tip-top right now. It really is. And what a pleasure to sew on a machine that is getting the job done. You know what I mean? And we've just done genuine cowhide. We did 2 layers of that. We just did 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas. Now we're going to go through this genuine elk hide. And look at it from the side, folks. This stuff is the thick of thick. Between these 2 layers, we're probably talking about 14 ounces of genuine elk hide. I would challenge anyone out there to lay down the stitch that this machine will through that many layers and get the job done as easily as this machine will get it done. And I'm going to switch this back to a zigzag just so it's easier to see the zigzag on there. And I'll go kind of a mid-range. I'm not going to go super huge on it. I'll go kind of a mid-range on it. And as far as the stitch length, and we'll see how this Pfaff 130-6 that came from Steve and his wife, that belonged to his grandmother and was used by his aunt, does with a task like this. We're talking 14 ounces of genuine elk hide. operated by my hand, not by my foot. All right, I hope we get the job done because this is no easy task at all. Here we go. Maybe that was an easy task. Just maybe that was an easy task. Well, I will be absolutely honest with you folks. I was going to do some other sew-offs, but I think it's kind of pointless. I really do. We've done the unthinkable to this poor little German sewing machine already, and I think we're going to give it a break. I'm going to flip this around because I think it'll be a little bit easier to see the stitches if I go this direction. And maybe not. I'll flip it the other way because it's going to be way too far to the right then, and I'm not going to be able to show it the way I want to show it. Alright, I'm going to put down our U.S. Army grade canvas. I'm going to put down our genuine cowhide, and we will change our shot a little bit so you can look at the stitch offs that we just did. Again, I think that this incredible German engineered machine has proven its case hands down, or hands on the foot control as it would be, and just laid down some gorgeous stitches that I think are brag-worthy. And I use that phrase a lot, brag-worthy, just because I think it really describes a stitch that is extraordinary. Now look at again what we went through. That's our genuine elk hide. 2 layers of that stuff. I almost started to say 4 because it's so doggone thick. And we laid down a beautiful zigzag stitch. Both the top and the lock stitch are absolutely spot on. And then we did all kinds of crazy stitch offs on this 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas. Everything from a zigzag to straight stitching down to about 25 stitches per inch, 10 to 12 stitches per inch, 5 stitches per inch. We just covered the gamut. And you really can't even see the thickness of this U.S. Army grade canvas from this side, but you remember what it looked like. I mean, it's like a green phone book, if there is such a thing. And then we went through these 2 layers of genuine cowhide, everything from a stitch that was near 30 stitches per inch with perfect stitch definition to a zigzag to a straight stitch that's kind of in that mid-range of around 10 stitches per inch or so, and everything to utter perfection with this Pfaff or Pfaff 130-6. Now the one thing I wanted to share with you that I haven't is, some of you out there might say, well, I've heard the Pfaff name before, or I've heard the Pfaff name before. I don't know a thing about the company. What can you tell us about the Pfaff or Pfaff sewing machine company? I'm glad you asked. Well, Pfaff was founded in Kaiserslautern, Germany. I lived, as many of you know, while I was in the military, I lived in Hanau, Germany. And Kaiserslautern, Germany and Hanau, Germany are not worlds apart. And I had a number of friends that were on bases in Kaiserslautern. So I knew that area a little bit. And it's really neat to know that that's where the roots of the Pfaff or Pfaff sewing machine came from. They were established right around 1862 by an instrument maker, not a sewing machine maker, by a gentleman that made instruments, and his name was George Michael Pfaff, or Pfaff. He lived from 1823 to 1893, and his first machine was handmade and designed to sew leather in the manufacturing of shoes. So kind of like a cobbler machine almost. And I actually have a cobbler machine, I should mention, that was dropped off to me by Annie and her husband a couple weeks back. They actually are commercial professional drivers, and popped over here real quick, and then they had to get on the road, and they do cross country. And I have a beautiful cobbler machine that I have that eventually is going to get on these workbenches, and I'm going to introduce that machine to you probably first through Facebook, through some shots, but a little call out to Annie and her husband. Safe travels to you guys first of all, but I'm really excited to introduce your beautiful cobbler machine to the folks on YouTube and Facebook soon. Got some other machines to work through the workbench first, but real soon. So those were the roots of Pfaff. They started working on making leather shoes. And around 1885, George Michael Pfaff opened a sewing machine shop. You might think, okay, you're going to tell us in Germany, right? No, in London. The Pfaff factory was expanded and modernized, blah, blah, blah. And George Pfaff, or Pfaff, the second son of the founder, took over the management of the company after his father's death in 1893 and expanded it further with extreme success. I think that's an understatement. Pfaff, or Pfaff, is a worldwide premier company that has a legacy type history of making the finest sewing machines in the world, to include Steve and his wife's 130-6 in front of you right now. But the sad news is Pfaff is no longer Pfaff. Husqvarna Viking, as all of you know from following this channel, a Swedish-based company, is no longer Husqvarna Viking. And Singer is no longer Singer, because they made some really great quality machines as well, all three of those makers. But sadly, back in around 2006, the American equity firm Kohlberg and Company, who had already scooped up Singer, was in the process of scooping up Husqvarna Viking, scooped up Pfaff, or Pfaff. So a company like that is driven by acquiring holdings and maximizing their share return is all about the bottom line, all about profits, driven entirely by making a machine that will last long enough that they won't be charged with a fraud, but not much beyond that. And they will reduce their costs in every single way possible. I mentioned that one of the first Pfaffs that Mr. Pfaff, George Michael Pfaff, made was by hand. That's not exclusive to the Pfaff or Pfaff sewing machine company. There was another maker also on the East Coast, which is where Steve and his wife live, that also had that level of pride in saying, we don't want to manufacture machines, we want to handcraft them. And that was the Domestic Sewing Machine Company. The Domestic Sewing Machine Company actually restricted themselves at their peak to making only 25,000 machines a year. And it's because they made every single one of them by hand. And every portion of their machines that were chromed, as you're looking at Steve and his wife's machine right now in front of you, any area you can see that's a little bit shiny, like down at the needle plate, the area near the upper tension, the stitch length control just above where it says Pfaff or Pfaff 130, the center controlled area that I did a lot of work on and getting it calibrated properly. Any of those silver areas, which are chrome on this Pfaff or Pfaff 130-6, on the domestic sewing machines back in the day, they were all silver plated. So if you ever come across a domestic sewing machine that's vintage and you look at all of those pretty silver spots on the machine, that's not chrome. That's all silver plating. I'm not making it up. So back in the day, there was such a level of pride among, I would say, pretty much all of the manufacturers, from the ones that were made in Sweden with Husqvarna Viking, the ones that were made in the U.S. and also in Scotland, that were made in Great Britain with the Singer Sewing Machine Company, and certainly a number of other manufacturing points beyond that with Singer. Whether it was the Pfaff or the Pfaff machines made in Germany, or as their roots dictated in England, the level of pride, the craftsmanship was paramount in everything that they did. I hate to tell you folks, sit down because I'm about to deliver some real bad news to you. That's no longer the case. Whether you invest thousands of dollars in buying a contemporary Husqvarna Viking long arm quilting machine or a Pfaff quilting machine for thousands of dollars, or a whatever machine it is, that machine in all likelihood has been manufactured in a third world country like Taiwan, the Philippines, Vietnam, and being driven by that holding company that has all of the major manufacturers now Everything is about reducing costs and maximizing profit. So that's why we hang so tightly onto our vintage sewing machines, because there is an heirloom quality to them. There is a craftsmanship to them. There is a sense of pride in ownership and manufacturing that no longer exists. It no longer exists, folks. It's not like where you can go to some car manufacturers and you can spend tens of thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars in a car, like a Rolls Royce, or maybe a real nice Mercedes or a BMW, or you can name any of the other luxury brands, and you're going to get something that's not quite exactly like it was back in the day, but a lot of that craftsmanship is still there because they know their consumers that are spending that amount of money absolutely demand it. But the manufacturers of today that are making sewing machines, let's just face it, we live in a disposable society. Everything these days is disposable. Some people upgrade their phones every single year. Not me. My phone is ancient almost, but other people are upgrading everything, and the manufacturers know that they have people conditioned that way, and it's no different in the sewing machine realm. They know that if someone spends a couple $100 on a machine at Walmart or one of the other major retailers, that person is buying that with the understanding that planned obsolescence, Google it if you don't know what that means, is built into that machine to cause it to fail. I just kind of gave you the definition. Planned obsolescence is engineering a machine or a product to fail. They build it so that it only lasts a certain amount of time before you have to buy another one. And that's pretty much with that large holding company that has all of the major sewing machine companies now. That's their mantra. That's their march. How can we make it cheaper? How can we make it not last as long so that they're going to want to buy another one? Thank goodness for vintage sewing machines. I'll just say it again. Thank goodness for vintage sewing machines that we have something that was made with that level of pride and that level of craftsmanship. All right, I'm going to get off my high horse, get off my soapbox, and stop ranting about what no longer is. We have no control over that, right? Other than just continuing to drive the message about buy vintage, buy vintage, buy vintage, especially buy vintage from Scott's Workbench, because then you really, really know what you're getting, right? And but it's really been a pleasure to work on Steve's grandmother's Pfaff or Pfaff 130-6. And I was going to mention to you, if you're not familiar with the Pfaff or Pfaff brand, not extremely familiar with it, you're more familiar with it now. But what really defines the 130-6 versus the 130, a defining trademark that you're going to see, or characteristic, is going to be how wide this area of the machine, which is basically the vertical half of the pillar, is going to be, because of the engineering of the machine and the cleated drive belts and the timing belts that are engineered into this machine. They need more girth, they need more space to fit them on the 130-6, and that's why this part of the machine here is noticeably wider than if you look at a traditional Pfaff or Pfaff 130. That's going to be your characteristic you're going to want to look for if you're out there out and about and you come across a machine and you're wondering, is it a 130 or a 130-6? Look for that vertical space above the pillar. If it looks noticeably wider than what you would expect to see on a 130, you've got a 130-6. And again, that's because of the way those cleated belts that time and drive the machine are engineered into this particular model. So you can see here, don't you love that? Made in Germany. You can see here, unlike most machines, the Pfaff or Pfaff 130-6, you're not going to move that stitch length controller all the way to the top to sew in reverse. You're going to move it all the way to the bottom. You can see the R there just to the left of that controller. And then you can see as we move it up, we've got a stitch range of anything from 0, where unless you're doing freehand embroidery, don't set it on 0 because you're just going to create a mess. and then we can go all the way to 5, which is going to give us that super huge stitch that I demonstrated on a couple of the sew-offs in this Premiere. But the range of stitch options on this machine really is very impressive. And then here we've got that control center that I had to spend a lot of hours getting right, and it's pretty simple to read things on it. You can see here we've got our stitch width controller right here. Anything from about 4, it's kind of a 4.5 almost, down to 0. 0 we're going to set it at if we're doing a straight stitch. Here we've got that kind of regulator where we can set the stitch range by screwing that either down or screwing it up, so that we can restrict the stitch length or the stitch width of what we're getting as far as an output. And then finally down here is a little control that's going to allow you to change needle position, either left, right, or center, where you're going to be sewing most of the time. So that's just a quick little thumbnail on that control center in the middle. Oh, I can see I was actually off camera a little bit and you couldn't see what I was pointing at. This right here is the control that you'll move. You'll kind of either shift it up or down to change that needle position. You push it in and then shift that whole controller up or down in order to change the needle position from left to right to center. I didn't have quite a wide enough shot so you couldn't really see what I was saying the first time. And I would say, you know, I get asked all the time, you know, do you have a favorite machine? I have lots of favorite machines because I've had a privilege to work on so many of them and restore so many of them. I would say definitely somewhere near the top, in the top 10, is probably going to be a Pfaff or a Pfaff 130-6. They're such a rugged, meaty machine, and they're so much fun to sew with because they make a lot of the sewing that is a labor to even some great vintage machines. They generally make it look pretty effortless, and that's a neat thing to do. So, oh, I didn't even show you because I think I mentioned a couple of times that I was using what I was referring to as a hand controller, and that's because the way Steve has this set up in his table at home is he has this mounted with an extension cord, and then you can see these 2 plug-ins, one for the light, one for the motor. And you can also see, I think you can see, let me turn my screen around. Let's see here. See if I can zoom in. I'm doing this backwards from in front, so it may not turn out really, really good here. Okay, you see that brass at the bottom of here? That's because when Steve and his wife shipped the machine to me, they did a really good job of packing, but they didn't think to protect these plastic plug-ins that go into this junction here. And all of this in the little bag here you can see, those are all the little pieces of plastic that got shattered and broken off when the machine was shipped from the East Coast to the workshop. So when you're looking at packing a machine and sending it to me, take into account that anything that can either be broken or dented or cracked, you've got to safeguard it. And that includes the foot controller, that includes the plug-in points if you have a style of plug-in like this. And I explained to Steve the simple fix is just put a little bit of black tape around the bottom of that in case they have grandkids or little kids that might be curious and try to touch you know, the pretty brass, or the pretty copper I should say, and get a shock off of it. So, but yeah, this only has probably about a 10-inch extension because it fits down into the table. So that's why for all of those sew-offs you saw me do, I had to, I'll come out on the shot a little bit, I had to be pushing this down with my right hand while I was managing the material and all the action down at the needle. I wouldn't say it's a high skill set, but it takes a little bit of coordination to say the least. Oh my gosh. Well, let me zoom out a little bit and just real briefly step into this shot because I wanted to share something with you, and that is that we are getting really, really close See if I can slide over here. We are getting really, really close to cutting my head off. We are getting really close to hitting 6,000 subscribers. And the last giveaway that Bill and I did, the musical one where I played all the little things on the music box, and there were only 2 people that were courageous enough to step out there and identify what they thought the songs were. And I had Bill being my music expert. Again, he has been in music for like over 50 years. So he was my ultimate judge and evaluator as to the answers that were submitted. No one won. And so we've got our next major giveaway coming up with 6,000 subscribers. And I'm going to be giving away, I think, a real nice sewing machine. So you're going to want to really keep watch for that. We've got a little bit over 100 subscribers to go before we hit that milestone. And again, our net gain has actually been increasing, probably in great result and in direct result to all of you sharing with friends, family, people you just meet, saying, if you want to learn about vintage sewing machines, if you want to see a goofy guy have a lot of fun with vintage sewing machines, you got to check out Cow Country Vintage Sewing and Restoration. And so originally we were averaging about 100 to 125 subscribers a month. That's still impressive in my book. We're doing almost 185 to 200 subscribers a month now. So in the next 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how things go, we might hit that milestone, and then you'll see our next contest as far as you being able to win a really spectacular sewing machine that's fully restored. Now I want to be upfront with you. I'm going to cover the cost of the machine. But I will ask that winner, whoever wins that contest, if someone wins that contest, that they help cover the cost of the shipping. So if you live in Australia and you don't want to put out a couple $100 to have my fully restored machine shipped to you, then don't win the contest. If you live somewhere in the US, it's not really a huge expense to get a machine of that heirloom quality and of that just incredible caliber. I mean, my fully restored machines, I've said it before, I'll say it again, I think they're the best in the world. And I've had the privilege to ship my machines all over the world. And so I'm really humbled by that. I've been doing this a long time, and I seldom will walk into the workshop where I don't learn something new and I don't improve on a process that I already have. And that's really a commitment that I'll give to you, is I'm not as good today as I will be tomorrow. I'm going to continue to work on improving my restoration process, improving the caliber of the service that I provide to customers when I do services on their machines to get them back to that optimal level. I'm committed to that. I never want to believe that I'm as good as I can be. And yet many of you would probably rebuff me and rebuke me and say, you're the best in the world, man. You buy, anyone that buys a machine somewhere else is off their rocker. Well, that might be the case, but I don't want to settle back on my laurels, in a sense, and believe that I can't get better. So I continue to improve. Even on this 130-6, as I did certain things to it, there were ways that I could improve that process and even make that machine better and stronger and more optimal than it was before. So really appreciate all of you and your faithful following, your dedication, not just to YouTube but also to Facebook. And again, if you're a YouTube only person, consider signing up, with a confidential type account on Facebook. There's so much you miss, there really is. And I would love for you to be a part of that following as well, because there's so many neat things that we share. There's things that we learn together. There's some fun stuff that I post. And certainly with any machines, including Steve's grandmother's 130-6, there's progress shots that I put up on Facebook as well, so that you can, before you ever see a premiere like this, and you actually see the machine operating and doing various sew-offs, you have the opportunity to see the different things that I'm working on that machine. And that's the same thing with this. I didn't show it in this premiere, but there were pictures that I posted doing that calibration and work on Steve's central controller right here, which is so critical to the operation of a machine like this. So stay tuned for more great videos like this. Keep watch for that major giveaway, and let me challenge you to step onto the shadows, whether it's getting involved in the chat on premieres like this, whether it's posting comments on Facebook, whatever it is, be courageous, especially as we are getting closer and closer to the end of 2019. Make a resolution to be courageous and step out there and make some posts, get involved in the chat, jump into the contests if you want to. I do impromptu contests all the time, and there's certainly an opportunity, you know, to win some really cool stuff, and that includes you international viewers as well. I just got done a short time ago of sending off a really nice sewing book to a wonderful lady that lives in Australia. And it's not the first time I've shipped something to Australia or England or Germany or Japan or other places like that, where I have faithful followers and they're courageous and they step out and they win a contest. And they've even sent me messages saying, Scott, don't send me something, man. I just wanted to have fun and get involved in one of your contests. I don't expect you to ship me something. My response? Give me your address. I'm going to ship you something. If you step out of the shadows and you have that level of dedication and commitment and passion and courage, are you kidding me? You bet I'm going to send you something. And it's not cheap either. When I mail a simple sewing book to Australia, we're talking like 21 bucks. And the price only goes up when you're going to other parts of the world. But you know what? You folks are worth it. You're worth every penny of it, because of your encouragement to me, because of your loyalty, because of your passion, because of your dedication, because of your blah, 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 blah. You fill in the gap. I just appreciate all you so much, and would not be where I'm at now, would not have the milestone coming up of 6,000 subscribers. I mean, it blows my mind. I've mentioned that to you before. I never expected that we would reach this level of interest with such a niche market, such a niche following. Vintage sewing machines. But maybe it's just one of those things. When we put it together in the right way and we introduce it with kind of a fun flair, people take notice. And let's keep doing it that way. One of my greatest hopes is that any of you that follow this YouTube channel, any of you that follow me on Facebook, that during different videos and premieres that I present, at some point you just chuckle out loud because of something goofy that I do, or because something goofy that I say, or because of me doing a little dance all of a sudden, just spontaneously, and being a goofy pirate on Talk Like a Pirate Day, whatever it is. You know, I'm more than willing to be goofy to get people to see the fun that can come from catching the bug that we already have, and that is the love of vintage sewing machines. So God bless you guys. Stay tuned for more great videos like this, and watch for that 6,000 subscriber milestone.